Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdsson of World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by John Snyson, economic analyst here at WAM, and we got another great question from the audience, which I'm happy to ask John here, because he is the biggest expert at WAM when it comes to economics, obviously. So Left Slayer asked us, fractional reserve, please explain this to the average person. Thanks. So can you go into step by step what fractional reserve is? And what it means?
Exactly. No, we'll get into it right away. So, what fractional reserve banking is, and I wrote about this in my book actually, which I have here, which I'm actually going to read out of to explain how fractional reserve banking works. It's called The End of Freedom: How Our Monetary System Enslaves Us.
Find it on Amazon.
Now, let's get into how a fractional reserve banking system works with the today's bank. So I'm going to use the example of the United States because they're the global world reserve currency and everybody is using the exact same system as them, but it's very easy and explainable to do in terms when it comes to the United States, because this is how it works in any other country, no matter if they have a private bank that they borrow from, like in Canada, or if they have a central bank that they borrow from.
Mm-hmm.
So how it starts with the government. The government wants to spend money. Hey, Trudeau.
Hey there, buddy. Shiny pony.
So, Mr. Trudeau, let's say we're gonna do a very simple number. We're only gonna use $100, but you can there's a lot more money that these guys create. So just keep that in mind when it comes to the amount of money that, for example, Trudeau, he wants to spend borrow $29.4 billion.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm gonna just use $100 as an example because it's very easy to go into. So Trudeau wants to spend money. He puts it into a bond, which he creates, which whoever investor want to get. They go through the primary dealers, the RBCs, the TDs, whoever is the primary dealer in your country or in the United States, the big banks there. They then take that bond and then they turn around and sell it to other investors. So they actually are making money right there on the initial creation of money out of thin air. What happens is that the United States, in this example, I'm going to go into United States again, prints a $100 bond, and then they give it to the United States Federal Reserve, which is privately owned, and they give back a $100 bill. That is freshly printed money. Now, that money is getting spent into the economy, right? Because the government always likes to spend all their money plus more,
Yep.
And as they deposit this, let's say, into JP Morgan, it doesn't matter which bank it is, RBC here in Canada, but as they deposit it into the bank, now this is where the fractional reserve banking starts. $100 initially put into the bank. What the bank does in terms, they take 10% of that $100 and they call it a reserve. Okay, so what they do with the 90 other dollars, they call that an excessive reserve. Now here comes the magic, because you might believe that $90 comes out of that $100 when they borrow it. No, it does not. That's newly printed money into the fiat fractional reserve banking system. So now that $90 is on top of the $100 that got put into the banking account. So now you've created $90 on top of that $100, and that's $190 in existence from that initial $100.
Yeah.
Now we're gonna go through a couple of steps so you can kind of see how this all works. So now that $90, the bank takes it and borrows it out to somebody else that wants to buy, a house or car or anything. Like, this is a low number, but I'm just using this as an example. So they borrow that money now out, and that person, of course, takes that cash and then it puts it back into the banking system again. Now what happens is that $90 again, they take that 10% reserve, so that's $9, but then they create another excessive reserve on top of that, which is the 90% that we're talking about in the first example. Now you have $271 in existence from the initial $100, and that's just two steps of the money moving through the economy, and now been deposited twice. Now the third time, of course, this happens again. They take excessive reserve at $90, so $8.1. Now there's the reserve is $8.1. Then it's $72.9 in excessive reserve, which they then borrow out to somebody else again, And now in only the third step here, there's $349.3 million, dollars created. Now you can see how fast this goes, like just on the first step. So think about that in the scale of billions, right? And it gets quite intense. So at the end of this, with a regular 10% fractional reserve lending system, which is the current system that we have, from that $100 you created $1,000, almost. Yeah. So you created $1,000. That's 10 times more of what existed in the first place.
Yeah.
So this is how the banks, as soon as the biggest creator of money is not really the central bank themselves. Mm-hmm. It's actually the banking system that takes that money and makes it into 10 times bigger. Now, what is interesting too with the fractional reserve lending part, I studied in the UK, in Canada, and Sweden and other countries. They've actually let it up to the individual bank to keep whatever excessive reserve they want.
Yeah.
So who knows what their reserve requirements is.
Yeah.
And I do believe like that whole system of fractional reserve lending, the banks should not be able to borrow money they don't have.
No.
It's very simple. You can't just print money out of thin air. It just creates a massive Ponzi scheme where you have the bankers and their co-conspirators, the people that can get the cheap money. They are going to buy up all these assets, and as the money increases, as they borrow this money constantly, and then they go and buy cheap assets, let's say housing. So this is why interest rates goes down, guys, is because they want that velocity to have more and more people spend money, and then they have more and more money getting deposited in, so they could fractionalize the system even faster. And this is how they can buy cheap, let's say, houses, and then they just force that interest rate down. So now more people want to buy the house, and they can sit there and get really rich off of that initial investment, and then of course they sell it before everybody else is panicked. So they know how to play the system, and they use the fractional reserve banking, which is printing money out of thin air that they don't have. And this is how it works. It's very simple.
Yeah.
And we'll put up a couple of these charts so you can actually see them and how they work.
And of course, as you mentioned, printing money out of thin air, then they charge us interest on the debt that's accumulated by devaluing the currency at its very inception, at its creation. And they keep doing it more and more and more. And then the people that answer for it the most are both the rich and the poor. And especially the poor, when you see the level of poverty these days due to this fraudulent system where people are paying half their money to taxes.
Thousands of percents, actually, when they go and get a payday loan. It's an interest rate apartheid, guys.
Absolutely. And of course, thank you as usual, John. It's good to get this information out there and make sure that people are aware of what's going on around us. And I know there's so much more in your book here, The End of Freedom, How Our Monetary System Enslaves Us. Of course, we've promoted the hell out of it because it's a really good book that you guys have to read. And it explains everything that's going on right now with the monetary system at a global scale. And, it's something that people need to understand more instead of going out and reading the really mainstream academic books that come from the guys that were brainwashed from the school,
You got to understand the information I got in this book is actually somewhat, the fractional reserve banking part is taken out of the modern money mechanics, and you should look it up. It's actually the PhD working paper that these central bankers, economists actually get taught upon. So
yeah.
I just got the information right from their own textbooks.
Yeah, we need to keep safe in the event of the inevitable economic crash that is coming at a global scale. We can see it coming. It's obvious because all paper money reverts to zero eventually, as it has historically, and it always will, because it doesn't have any preserved value and it's manipulated. And then, the good people of the United States, Canada, Britain, elsewhere, basically almost every country in the world at this point has to answer for it as individuals. Yeah. But we're seen as a collective in their pawn game, their chess game.
Yeah, you can understand every time people are using this system, they use it for their own well-being. They actually are taking out there knowing that they can print all this money, and they go and buy assets. They actually go and buy the commodities and the real things.
Yeah.
They don't go out and and he used his money to get into credit card debt on, buying concert tickets.
No, the
or something
elites
like
do
that.
one thing and then tell us to do another thing, and then we believe them, and we got to stop doing that. And of course, yeah, this is a giant chess game that we're basically being forced as pawns into. Throw away the pawns and protect the queen and the king, and basically that's what's going on right now. And it's been happening for a very long time, but it's all coming to a heat right now, and we're seeing basically 2008 all over again, but so much worse,
Yeah,
because
because people didn't take responsibility and let the system go its way of failure, which it should, and they're just papering it over. They're just printing more money, putting down their interest rates on a global scale to historical lows. It's never been this low before, and they're just doubling down on the fraud. Some of these guys, of course, doesn't know better, so they're just doing it because that's what they got taught in school. But they haven't studied monetary history like I and a whole bunch of, there's not just me, there's hundreds of other experts on this topic that you really need to listen to.
a lot of success stories too.
And you just need to understand this system has failed so many times. It's not the first one, guys, and it will fail ever again whenever it gets implemented on whatever scale.
As long as it's manipulated by man, there will always be those in power that see an opportunity, take it, and then we are the ones that suffer the most. And of course, they have created this limited hangout kind of perspective on it, where they convince people that they're doing the right thing, and then we actually see people in the streets asking for it. So we need to be aware of what's going on and what we're falling into, because it is a fire, and we are slowly starting to singe our hair, and eventually we're going to be burning alive in this, because we don't. So many people don't understand how to get around it, how to stay safe, how to stay free, and to be able to protect themselves, insure themselves and their families in the event of the inevitable collapse. So thank you, John. Of course, keep sending your questions in. Thank you, Left Slayer, for sending us those questions. We see your comments very often on the videos, and we really appreciate the support you have given us through the comments and your sharing and your general support. So thank you very much. We always appreciate questions from people. And if, as I always say, if you have some hate mail to send us, please do, because like I say, it's a lot of fun reading them. It gives me a good laugh, and we all need to laugh in life. It's very important. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, John, and we'll be seeing you soon. This is Josh Sigurdsson, John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.